Red Pill, Raw Truth with your host Matthew Horbury. Exposing the lies, uncovering the conspiracies, searching for the truth wherever it takes us. The mainstream has been taken over. It's corrupt to its very core and can no longer be trusted. Our history is nothing more than a lie written to deceive us. Global education is a tool used to indoctrinate us into a system to control our very thoughts and stop us thinking for ourselves or even asking questions. The spirit of mankind is strong, and they know it. That's why they're attacking us from all sides using deadly vaccines, fluoride in our toothpaste and in our water, processed foods that contain harmful additives that have little to no nutritional value. They want you addicted to lifelong pharmaceutical drugs that make massive profits for them and cause misery for those that use them. They spray us with chemtrails that contain heavy metals and other toxins harmful to our health and poisoning the very soil we grow our food in. Using genetically modified food, known as GMO, they are turning the population of the world infertile so they can decide who is allowed to have children. Make no mistake, they want you and your family dead, with those that survive being forced to live in slavery in a one-world dictatorship where every aspect of your life will be watched and under their control. Who are they? The secret society Satanist scum that rule the world. Red Pill, Raw Truth. No stone left unturned. Every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UK, on the Shake and Wake radio network, where the truth is all that matters, and the truth will make you free. Welcome to Red Pill Raw Truth. I'm your host, Matthew Horbury, and today we're not going to be joined by Judy Wood. We might be. I don't think so. She might be coming in later, but Andrew Johnson will be joining us in about half an hour. So it's just me for now, and Rick Reitner, if he's going to be talking to me as well. But what I'm going to do today, for now, is I'm going to go through some of the oral histories that are, these are the official histories that have from your firefighters and your lieutenants and your people that were on the ground of 9/11 at the first responders, and these are all under oath. So these can be submitted in a court of law. Right, and the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, these people, they put, I'm just logging into the chat room, sorry. They'll search they will go through these, there's 503 of these testimonies, and they will go to these testimonies and then do a quick text search for the word explosion. And then they will present, in the testimonies, the official first responder testimonies, there's 118 mentions of the word explosions. Well, they're not putting any context to that. They're just making a blanket statement and presuming that these explosions are bombs. Now, if we go to these witness testimonies and we do a search and we can read the text around the word explosion, we'll find that there's no mention of bombs, or if they are, it's out of context. So what we'll do is I'm going to have a read through some of these testimonies. Right, so if anybody wants to join me, I'm going to be copying this link and pasting that into the... Right. Okay, I'm good. Right, so I've got a testimony. The first testimony that we get is... one second, I've got Dr. Judy Wood mentioning me. Yeah. Right. Okay. We've got Mr. I'm Paul Ranberg of the Fire Department of Police, New York. The time is now 6:03. I am conducting an interview with Lieutenant Albrum, and he is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fourth one down on the list I've posted into the chat room. Now, if we open that out and we search for the word explosion, right, the first gentleman, for some reason, I remember particularly, he was a gentleman in his 70s. He said that he was on the 59th floor of the first tower that got struck. He was actually ordering some kind of food at the cafeteria. I think it's the 59th floor, I'm pretty sure, and thought that when he heard the explosion that it was the kitchen oven. So this doesn't sound like a bomb. It sounds like he's just heard what he's describing is what he thought we heard was the kitchen oven. And then further down, it carries on again. No, sorry. Right, next testimony. Right, this one is. Oh, sorry, that wasn't Lieutenant Abrahams. This was that one was a guy, Glenn Azenda, or something like that. Is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th down on the list, and that's the kitchen oven guy. This guy is Lieutenant Albram. On September 11, 2001, I was assigned to our MOS daughter who was sick at the school. Responded there. Before we responded there, I heard the call, come down, that an explosion occurred at the World Trade Center. Then I called my CO and advised him of such so he can respond. 1 second, Dr. Judy Wood's calling me. I think she's, I don't know if she's coming on. Because I've got nothing planned, I'm just going to read through these testimonies because it just puts it into perspective. Since I've been looking through these testimonies, there's not much mention of bombs, and the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth seem to hammer on these witness testimonies. They make out as though there's bombs everywhere, and these first responders are mentioning bombs and bombs and bombs. I've gone down first 10, and there's only 2 mentions of bombs, and one of them was talking about a kitchen oven blowing up. I mean, that's not a bomb. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12th, the 12th one down the list that I posted into the chat room. And we're doing another text search for the word explosion. No mention of the word explosion. I mean, there's 503 of these. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, Dr. Judy Wood. Welcome to my show.
Hello.
I was just going through the first responder testimonies, doing text searches for the word explosion and trying to put it in context. And I found a few interesting ones. I found one that mentioned the word explosions, and it says, what did they think? Well, I think I'll close it. It said it felt like it sounded like the oven exploding. It didn't sound like a bomb. It sounded like a kitchen oven. So, you know. You
have noise in your oven, like when you're cooking a turkey, you hear something go pop, spat.
Yeah, and the architects and engineers, they'll say there's 503 testimonies, these first responder testimonies, and then they just say, and the word explosion mentioned 118 times.
Yeah, they say when the jumpers, supposed jumpers, hit the ground, they exploded. There's another one. People exploded.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just found another one. Lieutenant, oh, sorry, not that one.
But no one there are a few identifications of what exactly exploded. Not a whole lot of things. I mean, you're not going to have people identifying a bomb blowing up in their face. But there are some particular ones, and I don't know if I've read them on your show before.
No.
I could read them. I got to change the glasses here. I'm getting serious. Let's see. Patrick Sullivan, a firefighter. He says there was a deputy chief's rig on fire that was extended to a 113's rig. There was a big ambulance, like rescue company truck, but it wasn't a rescue company truck. It was a huge ambulance. It must have had Scott bottles or oxygen bottles on it. These were going off. You would hear the air go boom, and they were exploding. So he stretched the line and tried to put that out. You could only use booster water. And then there's another firefighter, Todd Heaney. I remember getting a drink of water out of the cooler there. Then we saw... Then we just started to put the car fires out, and the rigs were going, ambulances. I mean, there must have been 50 of these things burning heavily. The Scott bottles and the oxygen cylinders were all letting go. You would hear them blowing up left and right. Got a distraction here, a four-legged one. Okay, At this, and then there's, let's see, Renee Davila. At this point, was your vehicle lost? He's an EMT. Basically, all we to do is to go around the building, come around, but it looked longer than usual. But it took longer than usual because we're walking in this shit. That's what he said. Like you move and it's the soot, like heavy dust. We're walking. I realize there's only have two people. I see my vehicle. The seats are covered. I've got my bag. I hold it like a trophy. Some people collect basketballs. I haven't touched. Pause. Whatever the force was, it was so strong it went inside the bag. Makes you wonder what it looks like in there. Then he says, but we were there. Vehicle 219 was destroyed. And his supervisor says, well, was it on fire? And he says, what? And the supervisor asks again, was it on fire? He answers, fire? We saw the sucker blow up. We heard a boom. We were walking up Fulton Street. I don't know how far we made it up when someone says, the building's coming down. By that time, I realized it's a repeat. There's other ones that were describing cars, quote, cooking off. I remember too, the cars. Yeah, I remember too, the car started to explode inside the parking lot. I mean, the cars started cooking off. They started going off. Boom, 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 boom. I remember that. That was Michael D'Angelo, EMT.
Yeah. And there's other things exploding as well. You've got cars exploding, but so when architects and engineers are saying there's explosions going off, they're not putting any context.
Here we have oxygen bottles, or that's what one described as in air tanks. He says oxygen bottles or air tanks. That's what Patrick Sullivan. I've been ridiculed for making that statement, but that is what the firefighter was calling them. And then they have they're blowing up left and right. And another one says oxygen cylinders. That's a firefighter who says that. And then Renee Davila, his EMT vehicle, emergency medical vehicle, blew up. Another one has cars in the parking lot going off, boom, boom, boom.
And wasn't there a policeman who claims his bullets were going off in his glove box?
Yep, that was in that same what I call it, the toasted car park.
So there's plenty of explosions going off, and if anybody
at street level, at street level, yeah.
Yeah.
So is there a wonder what's going on in the building? I mean, you have these humongous air tanks in the building, air pressure tanks. If nothing else, used for flushing toilets high up, to give the flush more gusto. Like I call them turbo toilets. Like I guess airplanes have that too. Pressurized air so they don't use much water at all. And so, but you also have water tanks up there. So these would be letting go, using the words of the firefighters. And when the walls of the pressure vessel weaken, at some point they're going to explode. They're going to be overpressure for the strength of the walls.
Absolutely. So if you put them in context, there's just there's not much. People say explosion, but there's architects and engineers are making it out as though controlled demolition, bombs, and there's just really no evidence for this.
Patrick Sullivan's using the word boom, going off, and then let's see, blowing up. That's the term by Todd Heaney, and then Renee Davila had used the term blow up and boom, and Michael D'Angelo used boom, boom, boom. So those are descriptions they're giving.
Yep.
Going off, exploding.
Yeah, I've gone down I'm just down the first responders page now. The witness testimonies. I'm just opening them up and just doing a quick text search for the word explosion, because that's what Richard Gates says. There's about 118 mentions of explosion.
Or explode. You also use boom.
Oh,
and
okay.
Blow up.
Yeah.
You also look for blow up.
All right. I was doing the explosion.
Now what happens if you put an egg in your microwave oven? Does it blow up? You hear
of course it does. Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly not a bomb. So I was trying to find the actual word explosion and read around it to find out what the context is of. That's what I was doing just before you joined us. And in the first 20 ones, I'm just going down the list. Just the first 20, there's only about 3 testimonies that have the word explosion in there. So like, there's not everybody's going bombs and explosions, running around. It's just
Right. There's very few of them. Like even Gage says there's 100 of them. There's out of 500, testimonies.
Yeah, that's like 20% of people. Yeah. So it's it's blown out of proportion.
And then here's some that actually identified something instead of just hearing a boom. Yeah, you're going to hear a boom. So what? I mean, there's if a house is on fire, you're going to hear a boom. There's some pressurized cans of hairspray or shaving cream or something that are going to explode. You toss those in a fire, they'll explode.
Well, there's plenty of things that go boom. I mean, just without nothing happening. Cars backfire all the time, just on the street as they're just driving away, bang,
Right, I'm just saying, like, if a house is on fire, you're going to have things exploding in there, too. Aerosol cans.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
It says do not incinerate on the cans. How many of those cans do you have in your house?
Well, I wouldn't have had so many if I didn't have a wife, but I've got, with the wife in the house, I've got plenty.
She has lots of spray cans?
Oh, she's got creams and sprays and all sorts. It's, yeah, absolutely. And I've got fly killers and bug repellents and murdering weapons.
Bug sprays. It used to be much worse in the 1960s and early 70s. Now they have stuff that has more of a pump in it, and it just liquid without being pressurized, because they're saying something about making a hole in the ozone. That was the theme. Whatever the story is,
Yeah, you're right. It were the CFC gases. They were hitting the ozone in one of them.
Whatever their story is. Yeah, their latest crisis on that. But I think they just gave permission to the spray companies to make a different container that was cheaper to make. They didn't have to, put a gas in it. They just, have a bottle with a little pump in it, a little, squirt pump. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to talk about?
Let's see. Well, there's a theme of, from a certain show where they're fixated on certain things. Like, here's my question: how do you cover up irrefutable evidence?
You call it theory, and if you put lots of theories out there, it just gets muddled in with the rest of them.
Right. It's just another theory. So, Matthew, do you have a theory that the towers are gone?
You don't need to have a theory on that one, do you? We know that they're gone.
There? Have you been there?
I haven't been there, but I know a friend who has, and I trust their word.
I've been there. I was there beforehand, and I was there afterwards, and I can, for myself, I can verify that the buildings used to be there, and they're now gone.
Nope,
so for me, that's not a theory. That's not a belief. It's actual evidence.
Absolutely.
And now, how about a lot of the solid parts of the buildings were turning into dust in midair. Is that a theory, or is that an observation?
I think we've observed that by now. I think we've gone over that enough to know that that's what happened.
Okay, so that's not a theory.
That's not a theory.
It's not that you have to go over it enough times so it's not a theory. It's either an observation or it isn't. It's like an autopsy. The autopsy is either conclusive or it's not. That the victim died of a gunshot wound, or they died from poison in their system, or it's inconclusive because you didn't find the body for a year, so it's pretty well rotted, so you can't really tell. So therefore, the autopsy report would be inconclusive. Yeah. So either you know or you don't. You don't have a theory.
Well, that's what I mean. I think we've covered enough evidence over the last couple of weeks to know that that's what happened. I don't think we have to go through all the evidence again. I think we've I think it's established now. That's what happened.
Using the analogy with a dead body, if it's doesn't have a bullet hole in it, you could also rule things out. Like you can rule out death by gunshot wound. He doesn't have a bullet hole in him, and he doesn't have even large amounts of bruising. Like the bullet didn't bounce off his skull. There's no holes in his body, and he doesn't have any major bruising. So you can pretty much rule out death by gunshot. And but even if you found a gun in his hand, oh, we found a gun over here, or somebody standing in the room had a gun in their hand, so therefore, no, that doesn't mean that the guy was shot to death.
No.
That's a fantasy or something someone's making up. It has nothing to do with the evidence. The evidence would be that there's no holes in the body, so you can rule out death by gunshot. And if the person is the body's still warm, in other words, it isn't too long after he died, you can do an autopsy. If it turns out he has lethal amounts of arsenic in his system, you can come to whatever conclusion there. But there's probably, I don't know all the medical details. There's probably other things that you would find, like blue fingernails or something, at the same time to consistent data. I'm not a pathologist, so that's not my. I can't make up those stories as easily.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. You're saying, you've got to
look at the evidence.
You've got to look at the evidence, and the evidence looks, yeah.
Yeah, you don't need a theory. The evidence is either conclusive or it isn't. Like if you had a guy out painting his house, and then now his stepladder is overturned on top of him. He's laying on the ground, and oops, you can see that he's got a big blunt force to his skull. There's a rock, is obviously his head, landed on the rock, and then his neck is broken. You can start figuring out what happened.
Yep.
But a theory isn't going to get you there.
And that's what the people do. The people go, oh, the building was brought down by controlled demolition, and they start looking for evidence to support their theory, and that's the wrong way around.
Right.
Yeah. And this is.
Or people who, say, well, Dr. Wood claims that she doesn't have a theory, but she has a theory that blah, blah, blah. That is their theory they're projecting onto me.
Yep.
Find out in my book, where's the theory?
Yeah.
So no, you need to check on your book. It's still sitting in the. I bet you the customs folks where you are haven't read this book yet, so that's in their slow readers. So that's why it's been a week in customs.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting for it. I look forward to getting my hands on this book.
As we were talking, I just checked, and it's still in customs. Nothing's changed. So it's been there a week.
Right.
But some people can read it in 2 days.
Yeah, I plan. I think I will.
But they have to read it several times. But that's quite fast. It would take me a lot longer because I absorb every word. That's something. But so it could have been one. Well, if they're not, if English isn't their first language, it might take them a week to read it. So maybe they'll start letting it out pretty soon.
Well, I hope so. I want to. I've looked at as much evidence as I can find, pretty much without the book, and I think when you read when you read what people have said about the book after reading it, you think, I need to read this book. This is a book that I need to get my hands on.
So there's many people who say, well, I've seen her website and I've seen her presentations. In this internet age of needing to be spoon-fed, they don't realize they don't even get 1/100th of the information that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone wants a YouTube video. Everyone wants a video on YouTube that'll tell them everything.
And that is beside the point, because they want to be spoon-fed. They want YouTube to think for them. And the whole point of this is we need to think for ourselves. How do we get in this position to begin with this official story business? Whatever official story it is, people want to be told what their thoughts are. They want to be told it was thermite, whatever it is, or it was Bin Laden, or it was, HARP, or it was scalar beams from outer space, or whatever they want to project onto it, and you can't solve a problem that way. It doesn't work.
No.
You can only cover up.
As soon as you get an answer, you go, oh, that's what it is. I'm happy. And if you're not happy with that answer and you start questioning that answer, they've already planted the safety net. Oh, it's okay, we'll catch you. It's okay, we've got another story already ready for you. If it is,
Yeah, they have a second net that they get caught by. I call it the lie behind door number 2.
Yeah, and they've even got a third net to actually catch you again. So, and then
yeah, in case you climb out of that one, they have one right below that to catch you.
And then they've got agents, and then they've got you putting out the truth so people can actually find out what happened. And then they've got agents trying to discredit you. So,
well, I wouldn't identify them as agents, because you get people who are believers. You know, they're out there promoting whatever it is in their pamphlets, just like people promoting the second coming of Christ or something.
No, I'm talking about someone who I know's read your book, and then they are out there putting out disinformation, and it's like,
yeah. Well, I don't know what their motive is. Yeah, I'm not going to speculate on what their motive is, but what I would say is they know better.
Yeah, they should know better. Absolutely.
And instead of pointing fingers and name calling of, oh, they're a Zionist or they're an agent or whatever group that you want to hold them accountable to, what I think of is that famous quote, lead, follower, get out of the way. We have leaders, we have followers, and we have those who are in the way. Those who have read my book and then say, oh, she says such and she has a theory about a laser beam from space, they're in the way. They're in that category. They're not leading, they're not following, they're in the way. They're putting out disinformation.
Yeah. But I think what they're doing is, I think they've been trained by one of the nets, like Stephen Jones is the guy behind the space beams theory. So, he puts that out.
He promotes space beams.
Yes, he does. But he projects it onto
you haven't heard me talk about space beams at a conference, have you? I don't stand up in front of an audience. So
no, absolutely not.
It's what Stephen Jones has promoted. There was a guy on another radio show I recently heard who brought up, oh, these people who talk about space beams are discrediting the truth movement, and isn't that horrible? They talk about space beams. Well, why is he talking about space beams? Does he want to discredit the movement? That's what he's telling us. He's telling us he is one of these people who talks about space beams to discredit the movement.
Yeah.
If it discredits the movement, why are you talking about it, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the guy that behind it. This is what they do. You've got the truth. They'll you hear them on interviews, and then someone will say something like, someone stands up and questions them from a memory audience. Well, what about the buildings turned into dust? And they'll say, what, you said vaporize? Oh, well, and then they start addressing the word vaporize. It's like, no.
They couldn't have vaporized. It's impossible to vaporize because we had Greg Jenkins make calculations for us. It would take more than 5 times the Earth's energy to turn the buildings to dust. Or no, to do whatever he's saying that got done to him.
To vaporize, yeah, absolutely. So they'll take away the question, twist this question round into something that they want to answer, and miss the actual question.
But without lying, without explicitly lying, because they can't get hauled into court for libel or for slander. It's a hazy line there now, because
it is.
Because videos get published online and get seen over and over again, and they're now being seen as libel. So it's not just what you say. It would be slander just to say it from one to another, but when it gets published online, then it's libel. But anyway, they want to avoid that. So what they do is misinterpret what they heard someone say. Oh, you say the buildings did what? Vaporized?
Yeah, this is what they do. And speaking about
they pretend
law,
they just innocently misunderstood.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do it. That's what they do. They'll you say evidence, and they'll say, "Oh, theory," and then they'll start addressing theory.
She had a theory. Oh, she just used the wrong word. Yeah, it was theory. But this thing. I think we have somebody else here now. Maybe he can chime in here.
Andrew Johnson, welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. I assume you're talking about this alleged court action that AE 911 lies are going to start.
Oh, we hadn't gotten to that one yet, but we could do that. We're talking about.
I was just trying to get onto that, actually.
I was warming up to the thing about what was on Coast to Coast last night. The George Norris saying that I have a theory about a pulsed weapon. I've never ever said anything about a pulsed weapon except repeating what Norrie says, and then Alex Jones is saying, oh, it's a laser beam she's talking about, or she has a theory about a laser beam or a maser beam or some kind of beam. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he had several different kinds of beams that he was putting in there. And so he's even disagreeing what my theory is from what Jory says my theory is. They don't even have a coherent story. And
you've been on the
that's right.
And so what I would like to ask Norrie is, why, how do you cover up evidence, irrefutable evidence? How do you cover it up? You call it a theory.
Yep.
So is that what you're doing, sir?
I think it's, the problem is details, or rather that's one of the problems, that people don't bother to report the details accurately, and so, when people are sloppy with the details, they get away with it. They're rarely picked up on it or rarely corrected. So, actually...
Because they're going to say, oh, it's an accidental mistake, and like if it went to court, for slander or libel, that they'd say, oh, that was just an accidental mistake, I just misstated something. But there's so much misstating.
Yeah.
That's not an honest mistake after a while, but they get away with it because it would appear that way. If it went in front of a jury would say, yeah, that's a whatever. So it's whatever you can get away with is what they're up to. But there's no, they can't cite anywhere where I've presented a theory, or even we have Mr. Fetzer who decides my word evidence means theory on the cover of my book.
Yep.
Yes.
Have you been on the show with George Norrie?
Are you asking me or?
Yeah, Dr. Wood, yeah. Have you been on the show with George Norrie?
Twice. Most
so he should know better then?
Right. He should know better. He says several times, but it's twice. Once in 2011, my book first came out, and he has my book. So does his producer. He has my book.
But he also said that in that particular clip, I don't know whether you played it earlier on.
Didn't play it on this show.
George Norrie actually said, oh, I know she's not going to like me calling it a theory. I mean, maybe that weren't the exact words, but
he says, oh, I don't have a theory. He mocks me.
Something like that, yes. And so he perfectly well knows that,
he's incorrect.
He knows what he's doing, but yet he's still doing it. He doesn't really see...
And he's not a scientist.
No.
So how is he, judging and ruling over a scientist? But that's another strange thing that happens in this community.
But it's not, by and large, it's not a community that's got a high concentration of scientists in it. That's one observation I've come to.
And I can see why. It's you throw your hands up and walk off because it's so insane. I think therefore I am. The Fetzering, definition in the Urban Dictionary. I think I'm right, so therefore I am.
Indeed.
Oh dear, there's too much of that going on. But we've mentioned a lot about court cases a minute. Yeah, evidence. Shall we? Can we go through some of the court cases then?
The latest is a couple of. They always have different ones going on because of this issue that I'm the only one who's submitted a federal key tam case about the destruction of the buildings. And Morgan Reynolds submitted one about the assumption, the false assumption they made of. We think they were planes, so therefore there were planes. That's what his issue is about. But mine was on the the fraudulent report about the demise of the buildings, and no one can refute what I presented. They dismissed the court case basically because there were only a handful of supporters, two of which are, right here on your show, and that's a problem, I think, for those trying to cover it up, because they haven't submitted a court case, but they want to make people think that they have. Like when I submitted my request for corrections to NIST, that was my first action. That was March 16th, 2007. 3.5 weeks after that is when Richard Gage's website went up, and then they, along with Stephen Jones, submitted a request for corrections to NIST. But theirs didn't include any thermite. But if they hadn't submitted one, they would look like they weren't doing anything, and Dr. Wood was the only one doing anything. And I think they're still fighting that battle, but they can't afford to do anything without any evidence.
They very rarely talk about that submission. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard them talk about it, thinking about it. They very rarely say, well...
It didn't work for them because of your video on it.
Well, possibly, yeah, possibly. But I think they had to be very careful because it's clear that it's clear to me at least.
To defraud the government.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. So to anyone that actually read their document and read their website, they would know that they were acting dishonestly, and and therefore that they were just going through the motions with that submission, and not really. There was no meaning to it, really.
To be pots and pans to drive people away from looking at what I was presenting.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, do you remember what happened when you wrote the press release, announcing that I had submitted this and making noise about it? You remember what happened right a few minutes later? Well, actually, within a few hours, Stephen Jones announced this new whistleblower come forth with the floor plans of the World Trade Center.
I don't remember the timing of that.
That was like within a day. It was a matter of hours.
Yeah.
And now we can finally figure out what happened, because we now have this whistleblower that came forth, and then all this hoopla went rippling through the truther community to rally behind it. Said they weren't looking anywhere else. They're looking for, where can I download the floor plans? Well, they call it the blueprints, but it was that's blueprints for truth. That's where that was coming from.
Yeah.
And it was really just the floor plans, but they present them as the blueprints.
What was the outcome of their court case? Did they just get thrown out?
They didn't have a court case. Wait, back then. So, but they're trying to give the impression they have a court case. So they had this NYC CAN thing. They were getting everybody's signatures on it. So what that does is get people to sign on. Once you've signed on, you're more invested, and you want to see something go forward. You want to be on the winning team, right? So you're not going to abandon something. So they're collecting signatures to get, see how many people we have. And I think it was to get something on the ballot, to vote for something, to maybe think about doing something about getting a new investigation. But there was nothing about any evidence.
No thermite, no nothing.
No, nothing. It was just about, do they have enough legitimate signatures to get something put on a past inspection, to get put on the ballot, and it failed inspection, so they went out and got more signatures. And then they still didn't have enough signatures, and so they were taking it to court saying, we do too have enough signatures, and back and forth. It was nothing to do with the buildings.
Okay.
And then finally they decided to abandon that. Now they have a new one. They're passing the hat and wanting people to donate. They don't have enough money to get a lawyer to do a FOIA request. And so they're passing the hat for, they need to come up with $8,000. Well, they have, $640,000 ad campaign that they came up with that money overnight to put big electronic billboards on Times Square. So I want them to get, they don't have a problem getting money.
No, they don't.
And
I think I read somewhere that they made $2 million between up to 2000,
2008 to now. Yeah, or 2008 to now. But that's above the table. You don't know how much they have below the table.
Oh yeah.
But what is their objective? And they say they need to hire a lawyer. That's what the $8,000 is for. AE 9/11 Truth has how many lawyers in it?
There's at least one we know of. But
Yeah, James Gorley, who's written hit pieces about my work, distortions of my work. And before Richard Gage said he couldn't submit a legal case because he's not a lawyer. Well, I'm not a lawyer.
No.
exactly.
So how did they throw your case out? What were the wording? What did
Well,
they
they didn't
say?
throw it out. They didn't throw it out. They dismissed it. Throw out is a kind of a derogatory term, as though it's nonsense, and it was not nonsense. They acknowledged that the law applied to my case, but in order to dismiss the case, they had to ignore the law. And now I am speculating, but I think it's pretty good, easy speculation there. They didn't state it, but I think it's pretty clear that if there's only 5 people who support the case, if it goes forward, the defendants are members of the military-industrial complex. And so there's only 5 people who support the case. What's going to happen to the judges if they let this case go forward? Are they going to get justified on the way home from work that day? That won't help.
Oh.
That won't solve it.
I mean, to mention the order of things, what happened was it went initially into the court of the Southern District of New York, SDNY, and the judge for that initial submission was George Daniels, was it, I think?
Yeah.
That was his name, wasn't it? And you can read the ruling that he wrote, because there were actually 3 submissions at the same time. There was Dr.
No, they weren't at the
Wood's,
same time. They're like,
well,
yeah, Morgan's was submitted more than a month after mine.
oh, okay, right.
6 weeks after mine. And
so did they rule on them at the same time, though?
They did. They ruled on them at the same time. They weren't submitted at the same time, but they ruled on them at the same time.
Yes, okay, so that's maybe what I should have clarified. So they ruled on them at the same time.
They ruled on them in one document.
Times.
Yeah, they used one document.
One single document. I think they just copy and pasted the details of the plaintiff at the top of the case, pretty much, didn't they?
Yep. I
I
was kind of criticized for not having any evidence of no planes, but that wasn't an issue in my case. And I was also criticized for saying that the military did it. I was also criticized for saying I didn't have proof that bombs did it. Well, that wasn't my issue. That was Haas's issue about bombs in the building, and his issue was about Building 7.
So well, they won't. Nobody will know who Haas is, so we have to explain that. And that was the 3 cases that were submitted. Or should I say, the 3 key term actions that were submitted were Morgan Reynolds, which primarily focused. Yeah, and then there was Ed Haas, who had a website called muckrakerreport.com.
His was not a key term case.
Okay.
His was just saying that he didn't want. He was warning NIST not to commit fraud by issuing a report about Building 7 because he suspect they're going to, commit fraud.
Okay.
It was something like that, and it was to stop action, and it was so it was a totally different type of thing.
Oh, I see, which even makes the ruling even more unusual than that they should use the same ruling for that case as well, or the same document, even though it was a different action. It wasn't
a different case about a different building. It was the only thing in common was that it was an event that happened. The original event happened on 9/11. That's the only thing in common.
And the thing that stood out in my memory of that was if you read the ruling, it mentions that something along the lines of, I'd have to go and get the actual document. I don't know if I've got it to hand now, but the document mentions the moon landings and JFK.
Right, yeah. In my thing, it says he's not going to hear a case about who shot JFK or what landed on the moon. That's not the exact words, but it's pretty close. Yeah, and it wasn't what the case was about. He must have misunderstood the my case when he read it, assuming he read it.
So you appealed and went forward. Did the other people appeal there?
But there's another thing. The lower court also said that, you know, I didn't have a whistleblower status because he decided he wasn't going to read my whistleblower report, which was the request for corrections to NIST. He decided to just omit mentioning that, so then he could say I wasn't a whistleblower if he didn't mention my act of whistleblowing. And so that was another issue he did. And to qualify for a PTM case, you have to be the first whistleblower about this issue, and you have to show there was fraud. Well, that's pretty clear. But what was happening is that the courts were, you know, misapplying the law or misinterpreting the law, and it was spinning so far out of control that they were saying, well, you had to show premeditated intent to commit fraud and exactly where they were standing, exactly where the minute hand was in the clock when they were, you know, pre-planning to, you know, what was in their mind at the time. It's something you couldn't possibly do. It was ridiculous. And this was around the time they were doing all these bailouts in Congress, and Congress wanted to put a what do you call it, a way to, you know, track and keep fraud from happening, and allow whistleblowers to come forward. And so they did a restatement of what the intention of that original law was. They called this the Fraud Enforcement Recovery Act, which was a restatement of the original thing, that the person coming forth, the whistleblower, just needed to show that they were a whistleblower, the first one. I'm still the only one, about, you know, the issue I brought forth, and that fraud was committed. And, well, NIST helped me out there. They even wrote that they didn't do what Congress asked them to do. But then the judges decided they were going to ignore that. They acknowledged that it applied to my case, but they were ignoring it, so they can dismiss the case.
But then you appealed, didn't you, and you went higher up?
Yeah, this was in the appeal level.
Oh, okay.
The lower case was just you know, nonsense stuff, and I was the only one to appeal, so that they couldn't be distracted by lumping it in with these other ones again. That's why the other ones, the other two.
Yeah, I think my connection dropped out when I was talking about the Daniels, the first ruling.
Okay.
And then by the time my connection came back on, you'd moved on to the later points. And yeah, so that ruling then, as you know, as Dr. Wood has gone on to say, was you know, then it was appealed, and within that ruling there was a hearing for the appeal, wasn't there? Which was
8 minutes long. 8 minutes long. So there's not much you can say in that 8 minutes. You're pretty much
and
defending yourself.
that was on the 26th of June, was it? Was it June 2009, wasn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Was it the 26th or the 21st? I can't remember.
23rd, maybe 23rd or
round about then.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there was a physical, you know, face-to-face 8-minute hearing, because you had some boards made up, didn't you, that you took into the courtroom?
And then they wouldn't allow them. They wouldn't allow them.
Oh, okay. Right. You had them made up with the intention of taking them in, though, didn't you?
Right, and then it was 1 hour before our start time. They said you can't bring them in.
Oh, really?
It changed then. So I had them made up, and we're in Jerry's office, ready to go down there. And you know, when we came in, he said, "Oh, we just hung up the phone talking with somebody. They said we can't do it."
Wow. I don't remember you telling me that.
Yeah, so we didn't get to have any evidence writing, but that was it. But when we appealed the first decision, we didn't. It was just my case that got appealed, so that they couldn't get distracted by anything else. And still, at that 8-minute thing, the opposition was trying to bring the airplanes back into it. My case had nothing to do with airplanes. She has no evidence that there were no. They were trying to argue Morgan's case in mine and deliberately mix them in. And I think it was even in their write-up about it too.
Yes, so they did not want to discuss that evidence that was in your case. I mean, that was a big no-no.
And also, on the defense side of it, they're saying, well, you know, Dr. So-and-so, who has a PhD in engineering, and then we have little Miss Judy over here. They're playing that game. That's pretty idiotic.
So what were the evidence that what in your court case? What was it? You had Morgan Reynolds doing the no planes. You had the Building 7. What was its name again?
Yeah, this
Ed
has nothing to do with
Haas.
has nothing to do with my case.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure how it came to be, put into place at around the same time. I don't know how that happened, but
I don't
Ed
either.
Haas. I'll type it in the chat window.
H-A-A-S. Yeah, his by the time he surfaced.
Yes, and he seems to have disappeared without a trace ever since. I've not heard much about him since.
So we were just muddying waters then, really? Because I've never heard of this guy's court case.
Yeah, it was just, just he's in, he's down, but...
Okay, there's another court case I want to get to. One second.
But the point being that the judges acknowledge, this is respectful of me, they acknowledge they were ignoring the law to dismiss the case. But do you blame them? Do you blame them? Because nothing would have been accomplished if the thing had gone forward if there's no supporters of the case. Because if there's no supporters of the case, that means you just justified the judges and the case is gone.
Yeah.
And justify the
backlash. Yeah.
Right. If there's only 5 people who care about this case, it's controllable. But if we had 100,000 or even 50,000 people out there, or 2,000 people out there in the street outside the courtroom, who are making a lot of noise about this, they couldn't have swept it under the carpet. We'd have a different scenario. So
your court case was that NIST contractors hadn't done their job that they've been paid to do. That way, the beef of your court.
They also committed fraud. And an example I like to give is like Underwriters Lab. They made 2 half-scale floor spans, mock-up floor spans, and 2 full-scale mock-up floor spans, and they cooked them. They set them on fire, and to see when they'd fail to support load, and they did. They cooked them for twice as long at twice the temperature Fahrenheit, and they didn't fail. They couldn't get them to fail, so they had to call the test after several hours. And so, but then they signed off on a report saying that fire did it. That's fraud. When they could not get their floor spans to fail due to fire.
Right. Absolutely. And they were.
You can go down the list of. There's a whole bunch of things like this where they knew better, and it was this game that the court system had been playing. But the FERA Act was what Congress did to bring it back to the original intent of law. It's not a new law. It was the original intent of the law. They were restating the original intent so that they could have whistleblowers who could have accountability for the bailouts. And every case that was still pending as of the date that was passed was covered, and that included my case. And the courts decided they're going to ignore that and go back to being able to claim that you need to know, prove premeditation, where the person was standing, and what their thoughts were, and whatever details. And specifically, this example that I use is, let's say you have a contract for a mathematician to sharpen pencils for everybody. The best mathematician in the world, is on the NIST report. This is hypothetical. It's on the NIST report to sharpen pencils for everybody. That's what's in his contract, sharpen pencils. But then he sees that somebody has added 2 plus 2 and got 9. But he isn't going to point that out that they have errors there because he's paid to sharpen pencils, even though he knows that this is a fraudulent report going forth. And so the way the law was being interpreted before was that, well, if he didn't sharpen his pencils correctly, that's the only thing you can say was fraudulent, rather than he knows the report's fraudulent and he signed off on it. And so the original intent of the law was that if he knowingly allowed fraudulent report to go forward, it doesn't matter what his contract was for, he's committing fraud, and that's fraud. And so to show, for example, Underwriters Lab signed off on a report saying fire did it, and they could not get fire to do it. So they knew fire didn't do it. It doesn't matter that their report, that their contract said they were just to sharpen pencils. And I think that was, a kind of a cover that they were giving the contractors. like, for example, SAIC, Science Application International Corporation, on their contract, I think they're to have a typist typing in the equations into Microsoft Word. Well, what they're doing is preparing the report, and you know what their area of expertise is? Psy-ops. Oh, but they're just typists typing in equations on the report, as though that would protect them from being involved in doing psy-ops. You know, they would knowingly be putting forth a fraudulent report. But
Right.
you know, the protection they were given is this loophole, and FERA closed that loophole. But the judges dismissed the case, decided they wanted to use the loophole anyway, so they had to ignore the law in order to use the loophole.
Okay, we're coming up to a break now, so we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Red Pill Raw Truth. We're discussing the court cases of 9/11, and where do we get to? We can continue from where we left off.
Yeah, talking about the appeal and how it was decided that, you know, this is an appeal for should it be dismissed or not. Now, remember, the defendants are the military, many members of the military-industrial complex, and you have 5 supporters of this case. What do you think the judges want to do? But the judges were respectful. This is the Court of Appeals. They were respectful. They acknowledged the law applied to my case, but they're ignoring the law in order to dismiss the case. That's respectful. And if this case had gone forward, if there was enough support for this case and it had gone forward and they couldn't ignore it, then we move to discover we can put people under oath. Isn't that what the truthers wanted? Put people under oath? And one of the first people to put under oath, of course, is somebody from ARA who, their company are manufacturers and developers of energy weapons. They also have a contract to know everything about any weapon of mass destruction that exists or is being developed anywhere. So not only can they identify what weapon it is, they very, very likely know whose weapon it was that was used. That's the closest anyone could ever possibly hope to get in this. I'm not going on speculation. That's, the people who know who did it would be right there on the witness stand. You can't get any better than that. So you can see why...
By doing things in right order, so by doing things in right order, you get to, without knowing who did it, you end up getting the people who did it by following the procedure, if you know what I mean.
So, but without support for this case, so in whose interest was it to keep truthers from knowing about this case?
Well, the perpetrators, the people who were behind the technology that did it.
Or behind the plan for whatever's, the people who want to keep the cover-up in place, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Because it would end the cover-up.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's the best way to put it. If my case had gone forward, it would be an end to the cover-up.
Yeah.
And
so the architects and engineers for truth, they're asking for what you gave them, and they
covered it up.
They just covered it up.
They covered up my case. It seems like that. Well, I do know that people who brought my case forth, to Richard Gage, were banned from Gage's group. They emailed Gage about the case, and then they got banned for it. There's several of those instances because they didn't want other people. He didn't want to these people to contaminate, the ignorant group of people who just didn't know about the case.
Yeah. Well, anybody who brings your work
I'd like
to
to just
gets banned, don't they? Yeah.
I'd like to just mention. I'd like to just mention here that the reason, I was talking about this last night at a talk I gave in Hull in the UK, and somebody asked the question, well, why don't you want this, about 9/11 to be revealed? Why are the architects and engineers group covering up what happened on 9/11? This is what they couldn't understand. And my answer to them was the fundamental thing which needs to be covered up by the people that are doing the covering up is the connection between energy and 9/11, and the fact that this energy technology, whatever name you give to it, we know that it involves energy and the control of energy, the direction of energy. That has to be covered up, and whatever way they can cover it up, that's kind of secondary, really. They can set up a group, to talk about thermite or nanothermite, and they can give that group a few $1 million to keep their operation going by sending these people on 30-day tours of various cities.
To collect anybody else who's fallen out of the first net.
Exactly. So,
Yep.
but the primary goal is to keep the connection between what happened at the World Trade Center and possibly the other sites as well, but definitely at the World Trade Center. That energy weapons were involved, and that technology could have other uses. This is what, and it has a history which is somehow, in some way, shape, or form, connected to what the scientists Pons and Fleischmann discovered in their process, which was then badly named as cold fusion.
By
In
Stephen
simple
Jones.
terms, if people are having trouble following all the details and the ins and outs of the court case and whatnot, which is, is sort of it's a long story basically, then if I can just explain to people that the reason for all of that being covered up is to do with energy, really.
I would like to add to that. So, okay, it wasn't bin Laden running airplanes into the building. It was bin Laden's crew putting bombs in the building. Everything else is exactly the same in the story after that.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter which of those stories, but if it's, something to do with energy, a different type of technology, that's a whole different animal altogether.
Yes, and then of course the other things that have to be covered up. I mean, we've had discussions. I think Matthew may have even talked about it just a little bit in the first program that we did, and that I think is why the Stephen E. Jones character has kind of gone into the background quite a lot. He's occasionally sort of stuck
Surfaces.
his head up. Yeah,
but he watches daily. He watches it.
He does appear to be watching things, and so by about 2007.
Whoops, I dropped out.
Hello.
Knowledge then, and it had grown a little bit.
Yeah, I heard you say about by 2007. Then it went off after. I got disconnected after that.
I think you dropped.
Oh, did I?
So
I was saying that Stephen E. Jones was sort of fairly prominent in 2006, and then in 2007, he seemed to sort of fade out of the picture a little bit around the time these court cases were. Well,
it was also it's like he handed the baton over to Richard Gage. I saw that at that time. That's what it looked like. And Gage, not being a scientist, doesn't have to answer scientific questions.
Yes. So that was a clear kind of change of mode of the cover-up, which has continued since that time. And I think, as Dr. Wood said, Gage he can basically pretty much say more or less what he likes, as long as he's got the right sort of language and the right presentation to rope people in, and as long as he is being skeptical of the official account of what happened on 9/11 and mainly at the World Trade Center, then he can get away with pretty much anything. He can give them any story that has vague plausibility to it, and that's the way the cover-up works.
Yeah, as I've been saying to Matthew, that they need it to be organic, but they just need to make a little adjustment on this side, over here, over there. So, yeah, Jones got it off and running in a particular direction, then sat back, and then if it needs adjustment, he might poke it here or there, but he doesn't have a hands-on part of it. And I think that's kind of the way it goes. So if people feel like they're participating, they brought this, like David Chandler, arguing about, this fall of whatever. But if he starts going off onto those flying pieces trailing dust, and doesn't say, oh, that's evidence of thermite, he's not going to be their poster boy. So he's going to say what they want him to say. He's given a leeway within the margins so that he can say things that aren't too damaging for keeping the energy issue out of it.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, a lot of people don't notice these details and inconsistencies, because they don't study it closely enough, or they don't have an analytical background, so they don't see this kind of organic process, and how it changes. The other thing which I think seems to have been happening in the last couple of years is that the role of this Veterans Today website seems to have kind of increased a little bit, and I'm basically judging that on the number of people that I've seen reposting the Veterans Today articles, or sending them me on by email, or reposting them on Facebook. And they, of course, are not really thermite oriented, although you will find articles about thermite on there. They've been quite heavily promoting this Fetzer's nuke nonsense.
Mini, micro,
on
nano nukes.
Yeah, and the various flavors of that. So again,
we're coming up to spray on nukes soon.
Yeah. So again, as long as it doesn't make the connection to an energy process, which involves some type of nuclear process as well, as long as these connections are kept out of the picture, they can get away with that as well, and they're quite happy if they can convince people that nuclear devices were involved. And they don't really care, for example, whether these stories are inconsistent between mini, micro, nano, or pre-planted in the building when they were constructed, and this sort of thing. That's not really important, as long as they keep people away from the knowledge of tritium and cold fusion and so forth.
It's also interesting. Yeah, Fetzer will mention tritium, but only to bash me, claiming I ignore it,
yes.
Which is not true at all. To me, it's a red flag of something. But one thing that becomes quite clear to anyone who starts looking at this is the nukers don't attack the mini-nukers. They don't try to destroy them. They'll do some slight name calling to make it look good, but they're best buddies. And the mini-nukers don't destroy the thermite folks, and the thermite folks don't destroy. All of those folks are all buddies together. One thing is clear: they all are very, very harsh about Dr. Wood.
Yeah, it's like WWF wrestlers.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. That's a beautiful analogy. It's
because
a
it's
game
all
that gets
staged
played.
as well, so that is a good analogy, because a lot of that was staged, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so but they don't do stuff like put out false stories saying whatever. You can fill in the blanks. I'm not even going to give them airtime, but there's like there's this one particular article on Veterans Today called "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly," and it's nothing but character assassination, full force, pulling out all the stops. You don't see anything like that against any other person looking into 9/11.
Yeah.
No.
And something I've been looking into more recently is, this is a little bit of a tangent, but is journalistic integrity in the mainstream, and the standards people are brought to. They may not talk about certain things, but they don't put out, super lies. They'd be held accountable. They hung out to dry if they put out fake stories. And I was looking into what?
You're talking mainstream here.
Mainstream media would be hung out to dry, and they have. There's been some just a few cases over history where it found out that the people didn't have source information. They made it up, and those people were destroyed. Their reputation for life was destroyed. And there's one guy who did something in the late 90s, and just earlier this year he'd taken his case to the California Supreme Court because they weren't allowing him to get a lawyer's license, even though he graduated at the top of his class from law school. He passed the bar exam with flying colors, but they wouldn't let him be a lawyer because he lacked integrity, because he put out these fake stories. I'm speaking of, that wasn't the Jason Blair guy, but the other one, Stephen Glass. And they said, he's just rotten to the core. There's no hope for him. And apply that to veterans today. Man, it's just night and day. I mean, there's just, and it's clear there's absolutely no accountability. If people make statements and there's no backing it up, there's absolutely nothing behind it. And so there's no standards whatsoever. But anyway, yeah, you're talking about the court cases. So they have to make it seem like there's court cases because Dr. Wood has a court case, and they don't want to look like they're not doing a court case.
So that brings on to April Gallup, and I want to go through her court case and the in detail if we can go through it in the time we've got left.
Sure.
Right. So
You've read through it.
I've got it in front of me. How did she start then? How did she? What's her background?
I don't know, exactly how it got started because she's just done several court cases, but I know about this the latest one. She was a worker in the Pentagon, and Andrew, be sure to, correct me if you have more details than I have, but just in general, she was a worker in the Pentagon. First day back from maternity leave, and her little baby doesn't have a security clearance yet. So you can't go to the nursery, so she's waiting to get paperwork for that, and so the baby's at her desk with her. And she goes to turn on her computer, and she pushes the start button on her computer, and just at that moment, there's this big explosion. She thought, oh, what'd I do? And that was the supposed plane. But she couldn't see anything because there's this opaque dust in the air, but she breathed. Anyway, she grabs her son and goes out through the hole in the building. And then she wants to sue somebody. Somebody's got to pay, And so she sues the airplane company for being planes or not planes. I don't remember. There's conflicting things. But this last case was about blaming George Bush and Dick Cheney. And then she had in that case, the way it was drafted was thermite in the buildings, in the towers. But she wasn't in the towers. She was in the Pentagon. So it was just idiotic to say it, had anything to do with that. Of course, there's no evidence. And Stephen Jones did not sign an affidavit for her case. He pretended he did, but he did not submit a signed affidavit for her case. He told her she's, free to use his online paper. And David Ray Griffin.
I thought she submitted his book as evidence.
David Ray Griffin's book she put in here, she cited, and David Ray Griffin encouraged her. I saw, some emails from him to April Gallup. He was encouraging her to file this case, but none of them signed an affidavit. So it looked like she's a wacky conspiracy theorist just putting out nonsense stories, saying George Bush.
The only person, as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, that submitted an affidavit from that crowd, there may have been other people that weren't part of what we might call the thermite crew, was the Danish chemist Niels Harrit. And Ralph
he's not an American. Yeah, he's not an American citizen.
Yeah, and if you read his affidavit, I haven't read it all and studied it in detail, but he more or less says, well, we think it might have been thermite that was used in the World Trade Center towers.
But we don't know if the thermite we found. Yeah.
Yeah. He said we think we might have found evidence. It was very much a kind of ambiguous language. Not very. They couldn't refer to a specific test that they'd done.
And even he states it on the Danish television that, I've got that clip on my website where he says, we don't even know if the thermite we found was thermite that was used. No, we don't even agree what it was used for, if it was even used.
How much thermite did we need? Many tons.
Many. Yeah.
So, on this news broadcast, he said tons of thermite were used.
Many tons.
Yeah, did he say many? I don't remember.
Yeah, he said many tons.
Many, yeah, he really goes for it.
So, but again, as Dr. Wood said, for them, whoever was handling that case from, the legal submission.
Reveal, and then there's Cunningham, I think was it, the other guy?
Gawley, was it?
No, Gawley wasn't. It wasn't. It was.
He wasn't involved with it, was he?
Reveal, and then there was a question if he was even a lawyer. Apparently that came up, but then there was.
I see. So, but anyway, as Dr. Wood said, just to emphasise that point, the April Gallup's case revolved around what happened to her at the Pentagon, not anything to do with, because she had nothing to do with the World Trade Center and didn't, so it was like they probably, this is just a guess, but they heard about her case and that she was going to try and, I don't, was this to lock them up?
You're breaking up.
Yeah, I'm losing you again. Hello?
Oh, okay.
Are you there? Yeah,
Reese upstairs.
Okay.
Can you again? Where did you lose me? What was I saying? I broke up.
Something about, I'm guessing you're about to say that she filed a case and they just piled on with this other junk.
Yeah, I think that was my impression, that's they'd found out they were going to file a case. She was, and then they sort of tried to piggyback onto that. What they wanted to put in they knew really was not linked.
Yeah, you're breaking up too much.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
I got a knot in there, and that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you can restart your...
The case is April Gallup versus Cheney, Rumsfeld, and Meyer.
Yeah, so it turned out to be nothing to do with the Pentagon. It was about, except she was saying they didn't protect her at the Pentagon, but here's what they did at the World Trade Center. So, she has no evidence of anything. It's all conspiracy theory, all speculation.
Absolutely.
Completely, 100%. It was all like, well, Cheney had to have known because, well, we know he knew. It was the truther story. So it really tested the truther story, but it got hung on April Gallup.
Yeah.
And then her they were saying something about, I'm gonna say it a little bit kind of mock it a little bit here, but that the judge, I don't know the exact connection, but something like the judge in the case was the cousin's uncle's brother, whatever, some long distance relative of Bush. And so therefore he needed to take himself off the case. And they listed a whole bunch of other stuff. They're very fixated on that rather than on any evidence.
Right, I'm looking at the article that Professor Stephen Jones wrote on the 28th of April, 2001. Can we help April Gallup in her court case?
Yeah, that was a 9/11 blogger. He posted that because so it was dismissed, and then I think when they appealed it, they were essentially calling the judge names, that he was a low life for this, that, and and how dare you, and it was very derogatory. And if you're going to have a judge hear your case, you don't do that to a judge. Even in my case, when my lawyer filed a motion for reconsideration after it was dismissed, it was like, oh, Judge, about this, landing on the moon and whatnot, perhaps you had a misapprehension of the case, just didn't read it correctly. Could you maybe try reading it again? It wasn't like you low life, whatever. That is guaranteed to, you're shooting yourself in the foot to say that to a judge. And I don't know if they call them 4 or 5 letter names, but it was essentially that in April Gallup's case, that the judges did that, and the lawyers did that. And there was 3 lawyers mentioned, and one of them had nothing to do with it. They just put his name on it, so they let him off the hook. And it was these other 2 that they were talking about getting him disbarred for having done this. And so they fined them $15,000 for the court's time. We just wasted the court's time in filing such a case. Just name-calling of the judge. No evidence. They were told they had no evidence, and instead of coming up with evidence, they came up with name-calling.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So they tried to submit in Thermite, and if Stephen Jones was behind Thermite, he could have submitted an affidavit to back her up, but he didn't.
Right. And then with this, if the lawyer doesn't pay the fine, the $15,000 fine, then April Gallup has to pay it. Is what it was. They're individually, accountable for that, or jointly. And so here she is getting really slammed, and Stephen Jones posts this thing like, poor April Gallup, is there anything we can do to help her? Jones isn't saying, here, I will help her. And
let me read it out, and you can, you can jump in anytime you want to make a point. I heard April Gallup. This is Stephen Jones's article. I heard April Gallup speak a few years ago and had the opportunity to talk with her when we were both participating in a conference in Irvine, California. April was in the Pentagon with her infant son on September 11, 2001, when the devastation occurred. There was no warning, but we know from Secretary of Transport Norman Minetta's testimony that Dick Cheney were following the progress of the jet as it came in towards the Pentagon, 50 miles out, 30 miles an hour, etc. There was no warning to April Gallup or her co-workers in the Pentagon, and the jet was not intercepted. See articles of in the Journal of 911 Studies.
So he's wanting people to assume there was a plane, and it's a magician's trick, getting people to say as though that's confirmed that there's a plane coming in and they should have warned April Gallup.
Yeah.
And that's what he's painting out that she was about to hit by this incoming plane. That's what he's left the reader to assume that's confirmed. But the Norm Mineta story is obviously bogus, because the 580 miles an hour, that's approximately 600 miles an hour. For easy math, let's just round up to 600, and that means it's 10 miles a minute. So the plane's 50 miles out, now it's 30 miles out. Well, that's 120 seconds between those two data points. So if the young officer is running in from the radar room, having a conversation with Cheney, and then running back out the door and down the hall to his radar room, then back to ask Cheney, there's not enough time. How fast can the kid run? If he talked nonstop to Cheney and didn't get any additional data, it would take 2 minutes to carry on that conversation that is described. So obviously the story is bogus, but it gets people to assume there was a plane.
But Professor Stephen Jones should know this, because he's a professor. This can't be an accident. It can't be an oversight.
He teaches freshman physics.
Yeah. Right. Well, over 100 died in the Pentagon disaster. April suffered physical injury from the blast and had filed a lawsuit charging Cheney, Rumsfeld, and Meyer and others. She deserves to be heard, but her case has been dismissed by Judge Demny Chin of United States District Court for Southern District of New York, and is now in appeal status before the Circuit Court in Connecticut. Can we do something to help April Gallup in her quest for justice and a fair hearing?
Why isn't Stephen Jones doing something? If he is proof of something, why isn't he doing something?
Because he's a leader. He just puts out the word, and he wants other people to do the
to get their hands dirty.
Yep. Did he get fined $15,000 for submitting this court case? Absolutely not.
He didn't even. That's why he didn't file an affidavit in the case.
Yeah.
But he led people to believe that he had.
Yeah.
I think Andrew, you know more about that with Ralph Winterrod corresponding with Stephen Jones. Hello? Is Andrew there?
Hi.
Hi. You know about that?
I'm back now. Should be.
Oh, okay. That Ralph Winterrod had corresponded with Stephen Jones, asking him where his affidavit is, because he implies he has an affidavit, but there isn't any. And Ralph downloaded the court case from the Pacer system, and there's no affidavit for Stephen Jones. Yet he states on Nylon Blogger that he filed a court case. I mean, they filed an affidavit in the court case where he didn't. But then he comes up. Yeah, you go ahead and tell the story.
I don't remember all of that story, so you obviously remember it better than I do. I do remember Ralph telling us, but I don't remember the details.
Yeah, he'd sent me his responses from Stephen Jones that it's clear that Stephen Jones did not file an affidavit for the case. There's not on record. There's no mention. The numbers are consecutive of the documents that get filed, and but Stephen Jones likes to imply off the record that he submitted one, but he did not submit an affidavit in the case. But then here it is when April Gallup gets fined for the bogus appeal, which wasn't, it was told that she could then, after they're dismissing the case, or when they're dismissing the case, they said, well, you don't have any evidence here. We'll let you submit evidence if you can go round some up and bring them to us. And she didn't. And then so they did dismiss the case, and now they're appealing it. They appealed it without any additional evidence, and the judges said we need evidence. And so then, and all they did was. What?
If we skip down the article, it says reasons for dismissal of Gallup versus Cheney. Plaintiff cannot cure their deficient complaint with affidavits. Note, plaintiff has recently tendered sworn statements, i.e. affidavits from two men who have published a lot of evidence about 9/11 fakery, about the fakery of 9/11, namely theologian Ray Griffin and physics professor Stephen Jones.
There were no affidavits.
There were no affidavits, but Stephen Jones is writing in this article. It makes it look like him and Ray Griffin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. What they did was she submitted his paper in it, not an affidavit. I think she submitted his paper, something she could find online, and David Ray Griffin's book. But that doesn't, she's supposed to be kind of a whistleblower about being a victim there. It has nothing to do with what David Ray Griffin is theorizing.
So in other words, if the judge were or other people reviewing the documents in that case, they would have to read the whole of David Ray Griffin's book, and they'd have to read Stephen Jones's paper, but that didn't directly address. Them. Yeah, that didn't directly address April Gallup's case, because the book wasn't about April Gallup's situation in the Pentagon exactly. It didn't. I don't know if it referred to her, but they would have needed to submit an affidavit that what they were writing was true and applicable to what happened to April Gallup and why. That would have been surely what you would do in an affidavit.
Under oath.
Yeah, and sworn under oath that this was true, because when you submit an affidavit, you're then, if you are found to be not telling the truth, when you're put under cross-examination, then you could be either fined or sent to prison for that. So they weren't putting themselves into that. This is David Ray Griffin and Stephen E. Jones. They were not putting themselves into that situation. In other words, they weren't standing by what they said was true. Now, going back to Dr. Wood's case, I wasn't at the World Trade Center when 9/11 happened, and I wasn't, I'm not a qualified scientist like Dr. Wood is, but I did nevertheless submit an affidavit, because I felt that if I was to be called as some kind of witness or something in that court case, I wanted to make sure that the people involved, with the case knew that I was serious about what I was saying, and that to the best of my knowledge, everything I'd said about it was true. So I was, when I think Jerry Leapart suggested that I submit an affidavit, I can't remember, I think he suggested it, but I honestly can't remember it was me that suggested it, but he agreed to it, but whatever the way around it was done. And I had no qualms about doing that. I was absolutely, totally committed to doing that.
And John Hutchison submitted one too.
Correct, yeah. So these people that say that John is a fraudster, then it's a very strange thing to do, to submit an affidavit in a court case.
And Stephen Jones would not do such a thing.
Right, and he didn't. So again, what does that tell people when they study these details? But it's easy in these talk shows to kind of gloss over these sorts of details.
Because they're entertainment. They're not not sworn testimony.
Yes, yes. And that's the difference. So, this is the difference between theorizing and actually presenting real evidence in, the real world, as it were, where you're actually trying to solve a case or reopen a case, or further the understanding using legal means, getting documents revealed, putting people under oath, holding people accountable for what they've done, in the case of those contractors that work for NIST, at least. That's the difference.
I submitted evidence in my case. I was not sanctioned, fined. Sanction is a, kind of fine or punishment by the courts. I was not sanctioned for filing a frivolous case because I did not file, it wasn't seen that I filed a frivolous case. I had evidence to support what I put forward. April Gallup's case, they put forward conspiracy theories, not evidence.
Yeah. Further down the article, it says here, to state that Professor Griffin and I only offer only conclusory statements and personal opinions without evidentiary support is incorrect and misleading, to say the least. We provide ample evidentiary support in published papers, including papers in established peer-reviewed journals such as The Environmentalist.
But he
no
wouldn't.
affidavit.
He wouldn't swear under oath that those were correct.
Nope. Yeah, so it puts out a good article asking for, can we help?
It's a magic show. It's a magic show.
It is. It is. People read that and think, oh, they're really trying to help her. And really they're not. Really.
They were using her.
Oh, absolutely. Was she not encouraged to do this?
She was encouraged. I saw the email from David Ray Griffin to April Gallup encouraging her to file the case.
Excellent. Excellent. There you go.
And the same with William. What is
Helen Mariani?
No, Kevin Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
To get him to file, David Griffin encouraged him to file against NIST, and then to represent Underwriters Lab and tell NIST that they're wrong, but that got him fired because he was representing the steel department, not the wastewater treatment department. Kevin Ryan is a chemist who deals with wastewater treatment plants. This is my understanding, but he represented himself as like a materials engineer. It would be like my when I was a faculty member at Clemson, if I had written a letter to somebody representing the biology department about a biological issue, that'd be misrepresentation. So anyway, David Ray Griffin egged him on, and he filed something representing Underwriters Lab's steel tests. He worked for Underwriters Lab, but in water treatment measurements, and so he was fired for that misrepresentation. And then he played it up as wrongful termination. But I think he initially was a sacrificial lamb, so to speak, from being egged on to make noise. They say, you shouldn't speak up because you can get fired.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen Richard Gage in talks where members of the audience have asked him, you've got all this evidence, why aren't you submitting it into a court case? And he says, we're not lawyers. What we do is we put this evidence out for you to do that.
But he's an architect from San Francisco who doesn't even know about seismic charts. So why is he, he's not qualified to do what he's doing either?
No. He's an architect, not an engineer.
Yeah, architects that's something that I think the audience might benefit knowing about. Architects are like artists of buildings. How's the space feel in this design? How's it feel over here? They aren't worrying about the strength of the steel here. How many bolts do you need? How many acres of concrete and how thick, how much rebar goes in this concrete? That's what engineers do.
An architect will go, shall we put an arch in this doorway? Engineer, is it possible to make this into an archway? And he has to get clarification to make sure it's feasible.
Yeah, can we make this an archway here? Is there enough support? Without, we want this to appear to be balanced on nothing. You've seen some really interesting architecture where it looks like there's nothing supporting something.
Yeah.
That's the concept of it comes from an architect. But then the mechanics of it come from an engineer who figures out how to do it structurally. And then there's the builders who follow directions and build it. In engineering schools, often, they have special watered down statics class for architects, statics for architecture students, because they can't hack it. And that's the first basic engineering course the engineers take. The architects, can't easily hack the math or anything to understand it, and that's basically figuring out F equals ma, or the sum of the forces equal, the sum of the forces on the other side. That's too much for them to handle. So, being an architect doesn't qualify you to understand structural integrity of a building. No way.
So he's not even qualified to actually discuss what he's discussing, is he really, Mr. Gage?
Correct.
I'm talking about you.
Correct. He's not a scientist. He's an artist or a businessman. There's some parts of architecture where they, like you're going to make a strip mall or cut up land into, where the road goes in the subdivision, it curves around, how you're going to chop up the land for putting houses on. That's more of a business type thing. But true architect, and you can look at the designs of famous architects. It's all about how's the building look, how's it make you feel, what's the concept. Like remember the twisted building, the torso building. That's not an engineer doing that. That's an architect doing it, an engineer figuring out how to do it. The architect has the idea, but it's like a three-dimensional painting. Sort of like an interior designer in a way. It's more associated with that. How does the space in this room make you feel? Does it inspire you, wake you up, or make you feel empowered? I'm an engineer trying to describe an architect's job. That's the best I can do. But I do know that.
Clip from the Liars page of the Richard Gage getting caught by the guy that he's getting interviewed
Abe.
by. No, it's
Dr. Abe.
Oh well.
No, this is Ralph.
Sorry.
Ralph, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because here we are, an unqualified engineer.
Have you examined all of the? She is extremely highly qualified, which you are not, as a structural physicist, interferometry, to do a complete. She's got the only one out there. She's put her name on the dotted line to file a case on it, a key tam case, a whistleblower, which I can't believe that you didn't. You admit you don't know, but let's say you don't.
There are dozens of nuts out there with PhDs. Well, let's
wait a minute. Whoa. Calling Dr. Judy Wood that. Wait a minute.
I said there are dozens of nuts out there that do have PhDs.
Our conversation. Our conversation is, can you examine and take it on her book, which she has documented to a great degree. Have you read her book, and are you willing to debunk it? All of these different phenomena. Have you done that, or are you going to do that?
Now, with Judy Wood is not going to acknowledge any of that evidence and just hand wave it away, then she's not practicing science. She's practicing witchcraft. Go ahead.
Well, you know what? The problem that I'm running into here, I have an architect that has no training in this at all, making all kinds of allegations without the evidence. Now, let's not be quiet here.
How can you say without
microspheres? Those microspheres.
There you go. I mean, I think we've heard enough. It's just there you go. We've got an architect here that's not qualified. It's
What is interesting in that clip, though, he says she's totally ignoring the evidence of these iron-rich microspheres, and then the host points out, because he's read my book too. He says, well, she shows this that they have iron-rich microspheres in crop circles in England. That's not proof that you have to get it from thermite, and Gage is saying that it comes from thermite. And he's saying that she ignores that evidence. No, it's right there in my book, showing that it doesn't, mean anything specific. Because how do you explain why you find it in crop circles?
In other words, not only does Dr. Wood not ignore the evidence that Gage claims she ignores, she actually points out that evidence does not, prove what Gage is saying it proves. As we just gave an example there. So it's actually. Gage is completely out of order in both the language that he's using and the claims that he's making. But, neither one is lies and the other is plain rude, so it's rude lies. It's nothing to do with facts.
Right where you cut it off, I think, is where he says, after the host points out, well, they're found in crop circles in England, then Gage says something like, well, I've not seen that evidence. I've not seen that evidence. Well, so Gage is...
I'm talking here. Microspheres were found in crop circles in England, and there was no fire of the exact type of...
I haven't seen the evidence for that, so I can't confirm.
So right there, that's it. So he's admitting he is ignoring the evidence.
Yeah, He does
And he
that all the
hasn't read
time.
the
Well,
book.
I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen that evidence. So,
Yeah.
so Gage is the one ignoring the evidence, where Dr. Wood is the one who's not only not ignored it, but she's discussed it.
Yeah. He actually says she ignores the evidence in page 120 to 128 of her book. So
Right,
that means Gage
right.
has got your book and he's read it, or he hasn't read it. He's cherry-picked to the section
Well,
he wants to.
120, page 122, page 123, page 124, and if you notice the comments in that video, from people who have read the book, they say, "Wait a minute, no, she doesn't say what he's claiming she says. If somebody has the book, look, it says the opposite of what he's saying."
It's very manipulative. It's
I don't deny that there's aluminum powder, a reason for having aluminum powder and iron oxide in the dust. I don't deny that.
He says you deny molten metal running
Well,
away.
first of all, look at the his thing about thermite in the dust. The dust has in it lots of stuff, including iron oxide and aluminum powder, but to extrapolate from there and make the leap, fill in this gap with speculation, say that somehow that proves what happened to buildings, that is no different than saying I found steel dust, steel particles in the dust. So therefore, in knowing that that steel makes up what scissors are, that proves that scissors cut up the building. It's identical in logic.
Yeah.
Just because you found various ingredients in the dust, you can find all sorts of stuff because everything that was in the building. If the building turned to dust, and I think he's now coming to the point of admitting that, if the majority of the building turned to dust, you're going to find every constituent of the building in the dust. So how do you determine what's attributed to what?
Absolutely.
I'm sure that I'm sure there's steel filings in there are from scissors, because everything just about turned to dust. The majority of the building turned to dust.
You talk about chocolate chips in the dust, because there were obviously chocolate chip cookies in there, but that could have come from a chocolate chip muffin, a chocolate chip cake. You don't even know where it comes from.
It doesn't even say that they're combined as cookies. Yeah. You have. Well, I could actually read that portion. Let's see. Got the earmark here. Okay, the buildings were turned to dust, and therefore the dust would be expected to contain all traces of all materials that were in the buildings. Finding traces of chocolate, sugar, and nano-wheat, in other words flour, in the dust would not prove that chocolate chip cookies turned the buildings to dust. It would not prove that the ingredients had even been combined as chocolate chip cookies in the buildings, nor that such cookies were capable of turning the building to dust. The same is true for thermite. Finding constituents of the building in the dust does not give proof of what happened to the buildings. In this case, focusing on particular constituents found in the dust and claiming that those constituents support a particular theory may actually distract attention away from the central and incontrovertible fact that most of the buildings and its contents were quite simply turned to dust.
Absolutely. You don't even know how these things are put back together.
Yeah, that's why I say finding steel dust doesn't mean that scissors, they were combined as scissors to cut the buildings. And I've seen some of the thermite folks say, well, it shouldn't have been there. Right, the building shouldn't have been turned to dust. Or also chocolate chip cookie remnant shouldn't have been there because, Susie Jones up there on the 85th floor was on a diet, so she shouldn't have had cookies in her dust. Where do you stop? Saying it shouldn't have been there.
Yeah. Okay. I was what does Richard Gage say you deny? The molten metal. He says you deny the molten metal. Do you see molten metal?
I don't say I deny molten metal. I wouldn't say I deny molten metal. I say there's no evidence for hot molten metal. I say hot things glow, but not everything that glows is hot. And if you see something glowing that's rolling over a piece of paper and the paper isn't burning, I think it's pretty safe to conclude that stuff is glowing for a reason other than being hot.
Yep. And the idea that there's rivers of molten iron underneath the trade center.
We're going back to 2006 now when I say, oh, it was flowing. And it was still flowing after 6 weeks, Stephen Jones would say. And I'd say, okay, does it flow down in the morning and up at night? Or does it flow in the tributaries out to the ocean? Where's it flowing after 6 weeks?
Yeah.
You know, if you have rivers of molten metal, where's it go? If you try to run it underwater, it's going to be, bubbling up and doing a steam explosion. Yet we have lakes of water where firefighters are walking around in knee-deep water on the afternoon of 9/11. They don't look like boiled chicken. Yeah, it's obviously not hot water.
The idea is molten metal. If there were molten metal, there would be no pools of water. The water.
If it was hot molten metal, the high heat, stories. Just because it gets repeated over and over again, or because a first responder interpreted that way. That's just like, you've heard the George Stephanopoulos clip where he says he asked a volunteer, one volunteer, Robert Galinski, explained the building all fell down into the ground, was pulverized, evaporated. Well, does that prove that the building was evaporated? No, that's his interpretation, the best he could do at that time. Because he's explaining what you see in that testimony of his is that there's not enough material there to what you'd expect to see. And he's doing the best he can to explain it away. But that doesn't mean that he's a scientist and has determined that. So hearing explosions going off doesn't mean that bombs were used.
No, we started off with that. We started that. Yeah. We started that with the episode with that.
It's the same theme. Just because somebody identifies a sound doesn't prove what caused the sound. The same with identifying a lack of building doesn't mean what happened to the building, or it's when people start making this leap. As I often say, know what it is that you know that you know that you know, and know that everything else you don't know, and don't fill in that gap with speculation, guesses, and assumptions, because then you're just solving an imaginary problem, not a real problem.
Well, the architects and engineers can do a nice little trick here on the witness testimonies, because they can not lie to you, and they can say, right, there's 503 testimonies, and there's 118 of these testimonies contain the word explosion, but they're not giving you any context for that. So that's
right. Let's name some of the things that exploded were people hitting the ground.
Well,
people put out the windows, hit the ground. They said that they exploded when they hit the ground. That doesn't mean it was a bomb.
One of the first ones I saw, as I was going down the list a few hours ago, one of the first ones on the list, it says explosions. It sounded like an oven. It doesn't sound like a bomb. So if you actually read what they actually put it in context of what the person was saying, if you just pull out the word explosion, and that's what Richard Gage is doing. He's just pulling out the word explosion and saying there's so many people mentioning the word explosions, but you've got to read exactly what they're saying and say, oh, right, well, does that make me think like a bomb? It doesn't make you think like a bomb, does it? It makes you think like whatever they're saying. They're there. They're.
He's quote mining.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just gathering
taken out of context, just like the Larry Silverstein quotes that often get referred to, and there's
the pullet.
Yeah, there's the pullet. There's the BBC person, and I don't know if you were ready to talk about that, Matthew, the BBC thing. Yeah.
Oh, James Family.
Yeah. Yeah, that often is cited as some kind of evidence of whatever, but if you stop and quit jumping to conclusions and stop and figure out what exactly you have evidence of. You have evidence of someone prematurely announcing that the building blew up. Okay, are they saying that she was handed a script to read? For what purpose? To out the fact that there was foreknowledge? That's kind of dumb. Or why would she be handed a script that she was supposed to read in a half hour? Why would she be handed that script early? For what reason? To make sure she announced it? Why not just wait till the building goes and then announce it then?
Yeah, just do it naturally.
Yeah, and so actually she wasn't the first one to say that. Another network said it. And she just, Maybe that network thought that nobody knows what's going on there. They're just jumping on whatever story. And the one that I like to present is the premature announcement that One Liberty Plaza collapsed. Yeah, it's still standing. So I guess it's premature announcement, but it's still standing. We're still waiting for it to go. But so many people jump on that one that because they're projecting on that the media's at fault. The media did it. They're busy putting blame first rather than looking at what the evidence is saying. You know, the evidence is clear that she misannounced it. And then I've got this other clip where right when Building 7 does go, and the person said, oh, no, but it already went. You know, they don't know which building's which. And if there, you know, foreknowledge isn't going to, you're telling me you have some top secret, need to know basis operation going on, and you're going to leak it to the press to prematurely announce that Building 7 went?
Well, this is where I've got the clip here in front of me, the CNN clip. So,
The Israeli foreign minister, a long time Israeli leader in any number of governments, joining us from Jerusalem tonight, where it is a little bit after 11 o'clock, about 10 minutes after 11. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I, but building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large complex of buildings that is the Trade Center, there were, and that is the right way to put it, there were the 2 towers, but then there are a number of support buildings around it, retail spaces, restaurants, office space, garages. The trains come in from New Jersey, bringing commuters, taking commuters back, come into the complex that is the World Trade Center, and now we are told that there's a fire there, and that building may collapse as well, as you can see.
so that could be that story could have come out, and then BBC just latched onto it. You know, they haven't said it's collapsed. They're saying it may collapse.
Yeah, if you have all that, the fumes coming out of the building and things falling apart inside the building was disintegrating all afternoon. It doesn't take much brain power to you know, conclude that building is going to come apart at some point if it's disintegrating all afternoon.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you put a balloon on a puddle of acid that eats, you know, the rubber balloon, at some point that balloon's going to pop. It's just eroding the outer surface of the balloon. Or putting something in the sun that is going to cause something to rupture. Or how about if you put a soda pop can in your freezer? At some point, it's going to explode. So it's something that you can kind of extrapolate as to what's happening, because it is losing structural integrity all afternoon.
Yeah, it's really weird that the BBC gets slammed for that, and then the CNN
and not
report
CNN.
gets nothing.
And not CNN.
Yeah, it gets nothing.
But why don't people make a big deal of One Liberty Plaza being prematurely announced as collapsing? It even says on the thing at the bottom of the screen, confirmed, partial collapse of One Liberty Plaza. It hasn't collapsed. So it's but as for you know, all the testimonies, this is here's one firefighter who says, I'm talking about from chapter 3, I'm reading, as I was looking out the window, which was a total of just 5 seconds, another jumper comes by, kind of like clipped the edge of the roof and just vaporized. The guy just disappeared. There was no longer a body, just a big cloud of red. So, you know, if Gage is going through all the first responder testimonies, why don't they see something like that?
Yeah.
And,
the second one I wrote starts talking about body parts all over the place, and a firefighter covered up the torso of one just simply because he didn't want to look at it, I think.
Right. He, out of respect for it, he put his jacket on it.
Yeah.
And I've seen body parts just going everywhere when they hit the ground. So you'd see one guy hit, and then there was a boom, and you see his arms and legs just fly off. So there's a person going boom. Did Richard Gage count that as a bomb?
Well, he could do.
This is the thing I really wonder about when people claim they go through the first responder testimony, because the truth is in there. And I'll read this last one, and I put it as the last one because it is so sickening, and the guy ends, "Yes, I'm done." He says, "Going up West Street, there were other companies, but we were distracted. There were just bodies all over the place and parts, and it was just clothes and flesh. I remember a guy getting off the rig and stepping like he was stepping, I thought he stepped in dog manure. It was bodies. Yes, I'm done." Now, there's a lot of testimony like that.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Mr. Gage see any of those?
Yeah, well, apparently, Dr. Judy Wood denies the witness testimonies, but there's over 100 in your book. So
Yeah,
it's
at least, and there's,
So it's again, if he just says something, the people just lap it up. They don't actually check to find out whether he's accurate, how accurate his statement is.
Right. It's let's see, there's quite a few other ones that, I was reading to you the other day. I don't know which ones are good.
Yeah. Well, we've got
here's one guy who says, "I'm thinking that it was the top third that came off, but you see, because the cloud is dust still there, but then he learns that it's dust and powder. There's nothing left of the building. He didn't hear a big boom go off. He didn't hear a bang, or there's an absence of sound." And he's expecting, he thought just the top of the building tipped over because that's all he could see, and then there's dust all over the place. When the dust cleared, where's the building? He was surprised to find the building missing.
Well, I think that's the general theme for people who were there, that the shock that the buildings suddenly aren't there.
And that it was not smoke, because this is a good one. So somebody, which actually helped me, I don't know who it was, after somebody said, "I can't breathe," somebody, I don't know which direction it came from, screamed out, "Don't panic, relax, it's not smoke, it's just dust, just relax." Because when smoke fills the air, it displaces the oxygen. And these guys were worried that they're goners, that this was smoke and they would be dead. But hey, just relax. It's just dust. It's not smoke.
That's why you have to get down underground to get underneath the smoke.
Right. Now, with the dust, they had to stick their face in their armpit of their shirt to use their clothing for an air filter because there's so much. This guy talks about, he says at that point when I started to realize my mouth was filling up like with a sandball, all of a sudden I realized when whoever said that, now I'm starting to pay attention to my surroundings. I realized there was no heat. You could breathe. Stuff was going in your mouth, and it was a cool air coming in when you breathe it. So I said maybe he was right. You couldn't see it. It was gritty, but everything was black because it blocked out all the sun. But the air, it was initially cooler than ambient temperature, and you could breathe, meaning it was not smoke.
So when Richard Gage says you deny heat, you don't deny heat.
That was the chief fire marshal that said that.
There's just no evidence of heat. This is what he's missing, or he's trying to cover up. When he says that you deny heat, you don't deny it. It's just that it's not there. There's nothing to deny.
And I think most people who looked at what was going on TV, you see all this unburned paper fluttering all over the place. So if you had bombs blowing up the building, hot bombs, they produce lots of heat, or even the spray on thermite or spray on nukes or whatever the end thing is. Both of those produce heat and lots of it. You would have paper on fire.
Well, we're running out of time right now. So any closing thoughts?
For me, or it just
for either. Is Andrew still with us?
I'm still here.
Oh yeah. Any closing thoughts, Andrew?
Well, I think really people just need to be very aware that a lot of the groups, like A9/11, are set up to divert people away from what actually happened. And only by trying to get your hands on the actual evidence, are you going to be able to verify that what they're saying is true? I mean, we've gone off into a number of different areas, but largely based on evidence. which we know about, and people, I think, should try and gain as much of that knowledge as they can. And that applies not just to 9/11 research, but, for example, I've been talking about the chemtrail phenomenon, and I think the same sort of thing is going on with that field of research, or that movement, if you want to call it a movement. I would argue quite strongly that the same process is ongoing, and I think Matthew, you and I would perhaps also say the same thing is going on with some of the health issues and the false information that's circulated about alternative health by some websites. So it's across the board really that you've got to be really careful that you do research as much as you can and try and go to the raw evidence and not just people's statements about it.
And looking at, cutting into this theme of the mainstream media, they don't make these statements because there's a problem with them. They can't source them. There's no sourcing for them. Why does the mainstream media not talk about mini-nukes in the buildings or bombs in the buildings? They don't have any evidence of it.
No, but they do talk about things that they don't have evidence for, or they kind of have evidence for. Yeah.
They don't have an end point, but they leave it at that. They can correctly say that NIST concluded blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And that's their interpretation of what they believe NIST concluded. It's a misleading truth, but they don't. People get upset they don't present their favorite conspiracy theory. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
If they could just like take it into court, why don't they take it into court? If they claim that they have evidence of something, a proof of something, and don't just have a theory, why don't they take it to court?
Yep. Okay. And on that note, we'll leave it, and we'll be back next week. So thank you for listening. This is Red Pill Raw Truth. Thank you very much.
Thanks.